Thank you for tuning in. The following is the English version of the presentation delivered at Flow Second-Hand Bookshop on August the 21st. It is around about 30 minutes in length. Since we're going to be going to Flow, I'm grateful to Surdam, who is the owner of Flow, for his kind support over 23 years. So it's appropriate to start with a personal Flow book story. About 17 years ago, I was drawn to a dusty pile of books, and they'd been pre-bought by a photo agency. But one of them really stood out for me, and that was by Konstantin Stanislavski, My Life in Art. It was actually pre-Soviet edition, very, very rare, around about 1920. So Sordam, being a man of great integrity, checked with the agency and then checked with me that it really was going to be a gift for an actor, which it was, and very, very gallantly let me buy the book. So the title, My Life in Art, actually inspires the following talk. By taking you all on a global odyssey, I hope that I achieve through the journey what Oscar Wilde described as taking the red threads of my own life and weaving it into a tapestry, a beautiful tapestry for you. I'm also very aware that I may be sharing kind of glorified holiday and family snaps. And so I do forgive. I do hope each of these pictures are beautiful for you. And this is something that both Oscar Wilde and Clement Greenberg, as critics, said about art. They said that its only function, a painting's only function, was to be beautiful. So I hope that my pictures, whilst many of them are quite personal, are actually impactful and perhaps even beautiful. So quickly, I'll show you some of the cameras that I use. People are often interested in that. So the first one is the oldest one. This is a Vorglander camera from the 1950s. The next one is familiar to many of you, which is a Rolleiflex, one that is a periscope camera, so one looks down the lens that way. And this is the iPhone. Now, the reason I show you my iPhone is that there's at least two pictures amongst the following which are taken with the iPhone. And we're going to have a little bit of a competition, actually. So if you can guess which of the pictures have been taken with an iPhone, you could well win this hand-signed print by me of Kashgar. So we'll come to that at the end. Now, those of you that know Flow from years back will remember that in its early days, it actually used to sell LPs, CDs, and they've always been a great inspiration to me. This is one I bought in 1996 when I first arrived in Hong Kong. And the cover is actually by a fellow British photographer called Chris Floyd. And I was really taken with what Chris had to say. He said, being a photographer means that you never belong anywhere. You are not part of a gang or a group or an organization. And sometimes I wish I was. So sometimes I too wish I was in some kind of gang. And so what is to follow is intended to actually be a dialogue between my work as a photographer and the various gangs I would like to join. The first off being my family. The second being the great fine artists like Rembrandt and Vermeer. I have, I think, a dialogue with some of those. The third group is other photographers. And then the final group is related to nature. And actually, I'm a great fan and I love nature. So I'd like to share some pictures I've taken in nature with you. And I'll conclude with what photographs cannot do and what they can do. And then we'll have the result of that competition I mentioned. So the first group that I'd really like to be a member of is my family. Now, there's nothing worse than a dad who's interested in photography, trailing behind every family outing. It can conclude in violence. This is my youngest, Jacob, showing his great appreciation for my artistic endeavors. And this is another group, a very typical view that I have of the retreating family with me trailing on behind. Now, the sad thing for my family is that they do represent quite a useful group in terms of the fact that they're always there. So therefore, I've taken many, many pictures of them. And I am a great believer that, you know, some of these pictures will be definitely treasured, time and times which are very precious, and memories. not only the happy ones, but also perhaps some of the sad ones, because photography is a reliquary of our passage through this world and our end in this world. So very briefly, this is my inspiration related to film. This is this is a still from the movie Brief Encounter, which was directed by David Lean. And this is Jacob on the train going to Lancaster. Both me, Jacob, and also Liam. Sorry, this is Liam on a train going to Lancaster. Both me, Jacob, and Liam all went to Lancaster. And this could well be on the same track as David Lean still, because David Lean filmed his film in Carnforth in 1945. And this was taken in the 90s, perhaps on even the same track of railway near Lancaster. So this obviously was on my mind when I took a photograph of this old guy between Beijing and Datong in the 1986. Now, this one is when Jacob first came on the scene, as you can see, and there's his sister Nicole, and held by Carmen, obviously his first day on the planet. And this one is a rather sad picture. It's the last picture of my mum, there we are. So basically, what I wanted to share next is that Claude Monet also painted a painting of his wife as she passed away. And that's how I feel that I'm connected to some of the fine artists as well. So we'll move on to that. So this is the remembrance of my mum, which was a year after she passed away. And we'd all gathered in North Wales, which is a favourite place for both my parents. This is my brother's, and you know, had a meal to remember her. And this was her favourite picture, Auguste Renoir, the boating party. So she loved company, she loved music, she loved wine and chatter and sunny days. So that's how we remembered her. Now, this picture is taken in 1986. And if you look at the inspiration here, this is a painting by Vermeer in the 18th century. And actually the doorway, even though obviously there's many thousands of miles between a Ming dynasty, many thousands of years, and many hundreds of years and many thousands of miles between a Ming dynasty entrance like that and Delft, but a very similar view. This one, ballerinas after Degas. Anybody very clever might be able to spot my daughter amongst them. I think this is a very Hong Kong picture because everybody looks so glum. You know, everybody's becoming ballerinas, but not very happy at the prospect. This one, Folie Bergère, Edward Manet, also illustrates my great love of drink, I guess. And this one is taken from my 86 Track of Time catalogue. And behind her is Baijiu. Also lots of bananas, so you can have both a bottle of Baijiu and also tuck out on some of those lovely bananas. And if you look behind her, these are fantastic Soviet-style kind of chandeliers or lighting. It's very typical of what was fashionable in the 80s in China. This one, Rembrandt, one of my absolutely favorite artists, and this is Christ Healing. And I'm going to show you a few pictures because Rembrandt, I think, is actually behind every photographer who works in black and white, is an inspiration for all of us. This one is Paramaribo Cathedral. Now, it no doubt was built by Dutch sailors because it looks like a ship, the hull of a ship, and the light is fabulous. And this one is winter cabbages. So those that actually remember living in Beijing in the 80s will look at this with great relish, thinking about the cabbages that they're about to eat over those long Christmas, those long winter days. I've got a cat bothering me, but never mind. We shall press on, and Jeeves will probably jump in a minute. But anyway, we shall leave her to it. This one is Qinghai Village. I was very lucky to be able to take photographs with Lifeline Express and also the Ministry of Health in China of people who were about to have eye operations. And this young lad, who was about to go for an eye operation. So we followed him throughout the whole process. And this is him with his grandparents in a very remote village in Qinghai. This is him, you know, after having had the operation and in recovery, with his father. And then this is another boy and his father who came from a different village. And then we have, we move on to Holman Hunt, who actually I don't particularly like Holman Hunt, and I didn't particularly like this picture when I saw it when I was in Manchester Gallery, but it was certainly obviously on my mind when I was taking pictures of Tibet. And this is Gandan Monastery. The monk is actually reading an English book by Geshe Gyaltsang Gyatso. And Gyaltsang Gyatso actually had been a young monk at this monastery. So there's a nice synergy there. And this is also him walking down towards the monastery, very high up. And it looks a little bit like Lord of the Rings or something like that. Now, Edward Hopper has been a great inspiration, and this is a picture I took whilst in Portland. And I wanted to actually experiment with color photography, because I find color photography much harder, funnily enough, than black and white. So this is one of my homages to Edward Hopper in America. Now, David Hockney is a great inspiration for me. And also, just on this point, this is a print from the 80s with Hockney. And we all know what Hockney looks like with the round glasses. And it's a moment for me to also pause and say a little bit about artists and what they wear. So Picasso, we all know his kind of striped tops. Even Andy Warhol with the white hair, and early on in his career, the black jacket. Francis Bacon, all completely disheveled and splattered with paint, but also something of a kind of iconic image. And this one actually, I think, was lodging in my mind when I took this photograph. And this is in a very special place, which I'd like to share a few words with you about, because basically this is Ozu's room, which is in Shigasaki. Now, Ozu was Yasujiro Ozu, the great master of film from Japan, who made and lived in this room actually in the 1950s. And the table is the very one that he wrote masterpieces such as Tokyo Story, and also the curiously titled A Hen in the Wind. Now, this is him and an actor called Noboru Nakamura actually in the very room that I was able to stay in Shigasaki. And I went there many, many times and found it a great inspiration to be in this calm, beautiful room. This one is actually also with Ozu's table, and it's a still life taken with some of the objects that I've managed to buy past in Japan. And I look forward very much to the chance of going back. Other photographers that I've been inspired by, two primarily. One is Bill Brandt, and I encountered Bill Brandt at the National Portrait Gallery in about 1983. And it's his portraits that I am especially inspired by. This is a picture I took actually at the Jing'an Hotel in Shanghai. And this is one of Bill Brandt's pictures from the 1920s, I think, serving girls. This one, I'm going to now share a few portrait photographs that I'm particularly pleased with, mainly because I know the people. I mean, you know, when we finish this, I'll be happy to take any questions about any of the pictures, but these are rather special portraits of people that I especially admire. So this one is Philip Wood. This one is Evangelos. And this is actually at Shigasaki. This is the beach directly behind Ozu's room. So there's a little bit of continuity there. This one is Twin Miles in Cyprus. And this one, I again was lucky enough to visit the Lifeline Express train. And this is a son and his mother that the mother has just had the eye operation, and he's guiding her around. Now, this is the Qinghai villages after we deposited Hu and his other eye operation success story. There's Hu's father in the back there, and we're just about to drive off. This is one that I snapped as we were leaving. Photography is about places we'll never probably go again. I don't suppose I'll ever have the chance to visit this village, and I don't suppose it'll look the same. So there's a piece of the past recorded. We now go on to the second photographer that has particularly inspired me, and this is a gentleman called Harry Callahan. And I first encountered Callahan whilst in Washington, D.C. at the Smithsonian. And it was a little bit humbling, because Harry had been taking photographs which I'd been copying without realizing. Every photograph I felt was original somehow. Harry had got there first. He started photographs in the 1930s, and it's a great person to check out if you're not familiar with it. This is one of my photographs in Japan, inspired by Harry. Let me just get rid of this. Okay, and moving on, we have Kitakamakura, which is a very favorite place of mine. And we're now getting into the idea of dufras. This is a word that doesn't really have a direct translation. It's from the Welsh, and in English, we don't really have this word at all. But what it kind of means is that it describes the world of natural affinities and connectedness that express humans' love of the land, of water, and